Ladies and gentlemen, fellow patriots and freedom-loving Americans, welcome back to another episode of The Source, Rulebreakers, Lawmakers, and Influencers. This is The Source, where rules get broken for the greater good, laws get made to serve the people, and influence drives us forward. Welcome to another episode with my guest, Dan Abbate. Dan also has a show on the Roar Network called the Big DA Podcast.
That's right.
And we're going to talk a little bit today about Dan's show, and then we're going to talk about something that people really need to understand and keep in mind regarding political candidates. And that is, most political candidates that we see have zero business experience. They don't know what it's like to pay employees. They don't know what it's like to sign personal guarantees. They don't know what it's like to make payroll. They don't know what it's like to go out and create a dollar that then goes to pay the expenses of their company. And so we're going to get into a conversation about that. Dan's been a lifelong entrepreneur. Currently, he's the founder and are you the CEO or you're just
I'm trying to avoid being the CEO as long as possible, but technically I am the CEO.
He's
correct?
Founder and CEO of Cloteen Capital, which is a real estate development and
alternative investment fund. Yep.
So Dan, welcome.
Thank you.
Give a little introduction about yourself and let's talk about your show.
Yeah. So I'm Dan, lifelong entrepreneur. I love building businesses, working with entrepreneurs to make their businesses larger, and investing. And, as you said, I got involved kind of in this sort of conversation of politics and like what's going on in the world. Mostly like a lot of people during COVID, I was a little bit indifferent to it all before COVID. But during COVID, I kind of realized that it's important to pay attention and to speak up when you realize that things are kind of getting out of whack. Mm-hmm. And I think we made it through a really hard time over that kind of 5-year period, 2020 to kind of where we are now. I think we hopefully hit the bottom and are on the way up. But obviously there's a lot going on in the world that still looks like we could backslide at any time. So we all have to stay vigilant with what we're paying attention to.
So real quick, let's get into your show and then we're going to have a quick discussion about where we are and recession. So
my show is, I do a show with my co-host Joey Parsons, who's a New York-based actress who's been in New York her whole career, 25, 30 years, whatever it is. So obviously she has that kind of New York creative experience, and then of course my entrepreneurial experience. And we talk to other people with various entrepreneurial experiences, given that we both kind of have both sides of the left and right side of kind of the perspective, and then kind of our guests are all entrepreneurial, and they themselves may have their own left or right side of the perspective of things. And the goal of the show is to kind of just showcase that at the end of the day, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're doing something like from your own will, as it were, we have a lot of stuff in common regardless of where you stand politically.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
So looking forward to the show. Looking forward to
it's good. I think we've got 5 or 6 in the can right now.
Oh, awesome.
And those will all come out. I think we're shooting for the 1st of November, so they'll start to be released.
All right. Mm-hmm. So you got to get them over to me so that we can get them up.
Yep.
It's really interesting, you had said about, where we've been over the past 5 years. And I'm sure a lot of people remember when Karine Jean-Pierre got up on the dais during a press conference and told the world that 2 negative quarters of GDP does not signal a recession, where we've come from this period where people just revise everything that we know and believe to be true about the economy. And so if you look at it through that lens, we have been in a recession for 3 years, right? If you look at Biden's jobs numbers over his 4 years, the vast majority of them were government-created jobs, right? They were not real jobs inside the real economy. So what we did is we wound up growing the government, which then grows the expense and the burden of taxpayers. And we created a narrative that, not we, but they created a narrative that 2 negative quarters of GDP does not constitute a recession. And so you've got many advanced degrees from Harvard, from various places. Right. So
the thing that I think is interesting about the reimagining of what words mean, right, is that there's kind of a simple process that people go through when you kind of change the words, and if you can get them to agree on that words can be changed kind of willy-nilly, obviously that creates a lot of power. Kind of there's definitely a power that's given over when you're willing to just change words.
Well, you're a philosophy major. You're getting your master's in philosophy in addition to other masters that you've already gotten. So, what would Socrates have said about the state, regarding, we'll convince everybody that what they believe is true is not true, even though we're not economists and we're not business people. Yeah.
No, I think that I think when you take the economic outlook of like the average person, they don't really think of it in terms of like macro level. They only think about it in their own little world. And I think the average person also has a tendency to be fearful, but I don't mean that like in a derogatory way. I just mean that in a like that they feel like that. I think entrepreneurs have a tendency to more feel like that they can control things and that they can like, well, it didn't work, I'm going to move on to the next thing. But I think if you're an average person, and I think that politicians and political people or people who are seeking power are aware that the majority of people, if you can get them a little bit afraid and you can tell them a good story that they can latch on to, that also in a lot of cases removes personal accountability for a situation, right? I think this is why I often think about, like, for example, just taking the most extreme example, communism. Why does communism always come back around in like these political systems? You see it through history all the time. Like, okay, so all of a sudden, communism is a great idea again. Why is that? When there's all this history that shows it's not a good idea and it doesn't work for all the various human kind of natural like ways of being, that it doesn't work. So why does it keep coming around? Well, for those seeking power, it's a really good story, right? And that's why it comes around. It really doesn't have there's no truth to it. Just like you're saying about there's no truth to, are we in a recession, are we not in a recession, when you're changing the meaning of words, like there's no truth in that presentation that you described. It's the same thing with the idea of communism and people wanting to believe something that's convenient, not because it's true. And then it's also the demonization of what is true, right? That's also another way to kind of gain power, is the idea that if someone is saying just objectively true things and they're inconvenient, it's actually easier to just call them a liar or character assassinate, or in some cases literally assassinate, whatever the case may be, than to face the truth head on, because they can't win based on truth.
I was listening to the radio on the way here, and Bernie and AOC, I guess, are going around the country doing, this tour, right? And Bernie's like, we've got, an affordable housing crisis, and we've got a tax crisis, and we've got a wealth gap and a disparity. And the reality is that you've been in Congress for 20 years, right? Well, AOC's been in Congress for at least 6 years. Bernie's been in the Senate for at least 3 terms, right? Where is the public going to start saying, hey, wait a second, like, stop lying, okay? You are just as much a part of the problem as you are. You're not going to give me a solution, right? The only thing, to your point, is you're either going to make me feel fearful about what the other person might do, or you're going to confirm my bias, right? All rich people are bad, all poor people are the salt of the earth, poor people deserve to get more because we work so hard watching Oprah and hanging out on our phones and not getting up at 5 a.m. like the entrepreneur, right? Now, I mean, obviously there's exceptions, right? There's people who are, laborers, et cetera, that are getting up at 5 a.m.
Right.
and they're
That's
working
awesome.
10,
Hard
12
work.
hours
Yep.
a day.
Absolutely.
Right? And they're just not getting ahead,
I think the real difference there in mindset is that regardless of how you work or what you do, there's two different mindsets. There's the I'm accountable for my own destiny mindset, and there's the someone else is accountable.
And that's communism.
And that's communism, right?
Right.
So it's the mindset between those two sides that really dictates all this stuff. Like we kind of focus in on the individual conversations and symptoms and talking points, but at the end of the day, I believe that it's really just those two things. Are you I'm responsible for everything that happens to me type person, or am I'm a victim of everything that happens to me, good or bad? I can still be. I mean, you could be very successful as a quote unquote victim if you just believe that everything that happened to you was kind of dumb luck or somebody else giving it to you. That's not a great mindset, even if it's positive for you.
And what people don't understand, especially with politicians, right? You have the victim and you have the victimizer.
Right.
Right? And Bernie is a classic example of a victimizer. Because I'm going to tell you all of the things that are not working with the country, and I'm going to basically tell you that you're the victim of it.
Right.
Right? And I could give you a better solution if we went to communism. I could give you a better solution if we taxed the rich people more. I can give you a better solution if we hired 87,000 IRS agents to go after people who make $400,000 or more, which actually isn't the case because they wound up going after the middle class because the middle class can't afford lawyers and attorneys and accountants, right? Lawyers and attorneys is the same thing, but lawyers, attorneys, and accountants to defend them. So they're the easy pickings, right? Okay, I owe you what? Okay, here's a check. Let me go on a payment plan. But yeah, the victimizer game in politics in America is really strong, and really America was built on land of the free, home of the brave. You could do anything here. There's tons of stories of people who had absolutely nothing, who went on to become millionaires and billionaires. And when you look at it, the communist leaning or the socialist leaning candidates and current political office holders really want to keep the American people in that victim state.
I think what's interesting about the U.S. in general is that there's a level of natural selection built into our culture because the U.S. is built as a country of immigrants, which is a good thing, despite what we're like this debate.
Well, legal immigrants.
That's what I'm saying. 100% legal immigrants.
You have to align with our values.
100%. Yeah, you need to become an American, right? Like that's the goal. But for all the immigrants who followed that process and became an American, which is the ones who came from the very beginning, they all were the people, culturally, from a mindset perspective, that left their old situation. They said, I'm better off putting my own destiny in my own hands and getting on a boat and coming to the U.S. whenever, 400, 500 years ago, or even less. My family came over in the late 1800s, early 1900s. But you're self-selecting essentially out of the entire world, the people who are not victims, right? They decided that their situation could be better by putting it in their own hands, which is why we have such a dynamic culture and why we have such a dynamic and successful country. Now, the problem is, I think, we've had generations of people born here, including myself. I'm like third generation, fourth generation, something like that. So it's easy to kind of fall back into those old habits as a country because some of the population didn't have to make that hard choice, right? Like they just kind of followed the path of what was available.
The transgenerational wealth effect.
Right, exactly.
Right? So
the immigrant
comes, the immigrant comes to the country, works really hard. Right? The children see how hard mom and dad worked, and they work harder, pursuing the American dream. And as that happens, so mom and dad start going like this up the economic curve, next generation goes like this up the economic curve. The children of the immigrants' children, the grandchildren, don't see all the hard work that went into.
They just have the spoils,
right? They have the spoils. So what do? They become consumers, right?
And they're used to getting things handed to them.
Exactly.
And
And then the wave crests, and they wind up going back down
Right.
rather than continue to go up.
Right, exactly.
And so,
And then when you've got that mindset kind of built into some of the generations that exist, it then, again, going back to where we started the conversation, it gives political power to those that promise things handed to you.
well,
right? Like that's how you get your political
look
power.
at Mondani,
There's the example.
right?
Right.
So he's promising free, right? There's a great saying, free goods are overconsumed, right?
Right.
And so he's promising free.
Right.
He's like promising free grocery stores, promising all of these things that the victim wants,
Right.
right? Because the victim doesn't want to have to work for it and doesn't want to have to take personal accountability and look in the mirror and say, the reason why I don't have these things is because of the person looking back at me,
That's right.
not the rich, not the government, not whoever outside
Yeah.
is doing that.
There's a thing that I remember from some economics class I took at one point that talked basic economics, right? That talked about that the idea of a line, of waiting in a line, is kind of a concept that doesn't really exist in economics, because there should be no line, right? Because if there's a line, that essentially means that we're instead of trading dollars, let's say, to move to the front of the line, because if you keep raising the price, the line will eventually dissipate and you'll only just be able to, supply and demand will be equal and there will be no line because everyone who wants something will get something because they're willing to pay the price. Now, that's why, speaking of like communist situations, why you always talk about the red line or you talk about everyone waiting in line for stuff, because you take away the ability for that people to opt out of the demand, right? Because there's no reason to not stand in line because, well, I guess I'm just going to stand in line. It doesn't cost me anything. I don't have anything else to do anyway, right?
Well, that's
so I'm just going to stand in line now. And so like that becomes the currency is your time to just stand, wait for something. And then the quality of the product on the other side is the same thing. There's no incentive to create a product that's actually good on the other side of it, because you have to, if you've got people wanting something, you want to create that demand. And so it just doesn't work. Like again, like people, the other thing I always think is interesting in like socialist and communist situations is how quickly black markets develop, because and I'm not like, I guess I am. I guess I'm just a real advocate for kind of capitalistic type stuff, because capitalism, I think, most closely represents how we behave naturally. And so therefore it's not at odds with our normal human behavior. That's why you see the black markets pop up immediately when you create some sort of artificial barrier, like because people are still going to want to trade with each other. They're still going to want to get what they want. They're going to work their little side back deals and work around the system to get what they want. And then it just, in communism, it becomes more about politics and who do you know. So all the people that say, well, it's more fair and everybody's the same. No, you're not the same. It really comes down to you just change the currency you're using. In this case, everybody uses real money, which is fungible and we can all get it if we want it. Where in that scenario, it's like, well, if you're not brothers with this guy or cousins with that guy, or that you don't have the political connections, you can't get anything.
And that's what people don't realize, right? That regardless of what Mondani is promising, you're still going to have a class of haves and have-nots.
Yeah.
You're going to have a class of insiders and outsiders.
Yep.
And typically the people that they are promising to serve the most
Go further down.
are going further down.
Yes.
Right?
It always is that way.
The fact that, I mean, you look at the welfare system, right? It's like if you work more than a certain number of hours, you don't get the benefits, right? Well, the mindset is like, hey, if you work more than a certain number of hours, you have more money coming in. You're not losing something by them reducing your benefits or taking away your benefits, right?
Right.
And so that's what's going to happen in New York. And the reality is this, I mean, it brings up the conversation you and I have talked about, which is when are we going to start electing people who have real world experience, right? People who have run businesses. New York is like one of the largest budgets on the planet for a city. And you're going to elect a man whose only experience was acting.
Yeah, which happens a lot. You notice there's a lot of actors in those sorts of
roles.
roles.
Well, because they know how to empathize and make people feel good.
Yeah.
Right? But they've never written a paycheck. They've never signed a personal guarantee.
Right.
They never put it all on the line to prove who they are, what they can do, prove their idea, etc. They've never overseen people. They don't know what it's like to hire somebody. They don't know what it's like to fire somebody.
Right.
So now you're going to take someone who has no real world experience and put them in charge of one of the biggest cities for the sheer reason that he's going to give free stuff to people.
Right. Right. You know, I find interesting that the if you're expecting free stuff, you become fully dependent, obviously. You become fully, I guess you become ultimately the maximized victim, essentially, at that point, right? So like your entire life is controlled. And what's funny about it is the story that people like Mondani say is that this is going to free you, right? Like right. You're oppressed now in this situation today, but after we do all these things, then you're going to be able to like live and flourish and do all these great things. When the truth of the matter, again, historically speaking, it's like you can see it, and even logically thinking about it, you can see that the more dependent you become, and they can say, oh, well, I'm not dependent now because I'm dependent on my job. You can be dependent on your job, but you can also choose to go to another job. You can choose to, if you don't like the hours you're working, you can change the hours you work. Now, the thing that I always, speaking of change, the thing that I always notice when you have these conversations with people is that people don't realize that they have a choice all the time. You 100% of the time have a choice that you can make in your life, whatever it is. They'll say, I don't have any choice, or I'm backed into a corner, I can't do anything. You have tons of choices all the time. You might not like any of them, right? That doesn't mean they're like it might be one bad choice versus another bad choice versus another bad choice, and you just have to choose the lesser of the evils. But you have choices all day long, all the time. And I think what the story that people like to be told is that I'm going to give you this better choice because it's like manufactured better choice. It's not real, but it's a manufactured better choice.
It's a no perceptible pain choice.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Like if I have to make a choice between I don't have enough money to eat steak tonight, I have to eat pasta, and I hate pasta, right? That choice implies pain.
Right.
Right? Because it's not what I would rather do.
Correct.
But for me to vote for someone with the promise that I'm going to get whatever it is I want, right, on a monthly basis, right, then I'm willing to take that choice because the vote implies no pain.
Right.
Super simple. I go in, I check the box, I'm going to have this guy who has no experience in the real world and is going to give me promises, which, by the way, are the same promises that every Democrat mayor has given to every New Yorker since the beginning of time, right? So the promises are the same, the deliverables are going to be the same.
Yep.
They're not going to work.
Yeah.
Right.
What do you think is the like for New Yorkers that are there now in this situation? You see a lot of it. Hey, I'm going to move to Florida. Forget it, right? Like I'm just going to move to Florida, right? So, and even the ones who are staunch conservative or staunch Republicans saying, "Hey, I'm going to move to Florida now." I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I was in New York beginning of September. I was sitting at a restaurant, and a woman had her dog with her. So of course, we started talking about dogs, and she's like, "Oh, I'm a realtor for Douglas Elliman, and if this Mondani guy gets in, I'm coming to Florida." And it's like, wait a second. New Yorkers have created this, right? You created Mondani, okay? You have an obligation to the city that you've derived so much from over the years of your life and your livelihood to stay and vote against this, to stay and rally other people to choose another candidate, to put the city on a path where it has a future, because there is no future with him being elected. And if you think you're going to just screw it all up and run to Florida, we don't want you.
Don't screw it up down here.
We don't want you because you're going to screw it up down here too.
Right.
People choose Florida for a variety of different reasons, but one of them is that we are free, that we have a governor who believes in accountability, right? And that we have a state that celebrates entrepreneurship and the individual. And we don't need you.
Right.
If you've already ruined up there and you're not willing to take a stand up there, don't come down here.
Yeah, I agree. And speaking of, like, DeSantis is a good example of political leadership that can make a big difference in terms of outcomes over a very short period of time. DeSantis, in my opinion, during the COVID time, look, I can get into like some really exaggerated, like, COVID was a literal takeover attempt of the entire world. Like, that's kind of my position after
part of the Great Reset.
After living through it and everything, I believe that to be the case, and I think that DeSantis and Governor Abbate in Texas, and people who there was a small portion that really just stepped back and said, no, we're not doing this, right? This is not how we're going to operate, and we don't really care what the rest of the world says. We're making a choice for ourselves. We're not being victims. We're not being dragged along. We're making a decision based on our own beliefs, right? And so it goes to show you how quickly, looking at Florida statistics over the last 5 years, in a bunch of different categories, why that's so important. So to your point about Mondani in New York, and maybe this person you were talking to while you were up there, you can tell that someone who is implementing policy and kind of creating, it's like a business, creating a corporate culture within a area can make immediate positive or negative results on that place. And I think that in New York's case, look, New York is not exactly not socialist communist. Like, it's got a lot of problems already in that regard. But I think I do feel like that if Mondani was to actually execute what he says he wants to execute, we will have a very good example of why it doesn't work, massive, a macro level example, and hopefully maybe you could look at it like maybe that's even a good thing to some degree, because you
need to see the pain.
You got to see it. Like the U.S. is a big country with lots of different people in lots of different states that all have some level of autonomous control of themselves. So just as a reminder to, we had Cuba, 90 miles off of Florida, that kind of gave us an example however many years, 60, 70 years ago, or longer than that probably at this point. But they kind of gave us the example back then for that generation to be like, ooh, that was bad. Because Cuba used to be like Las Vegas. It was the place you go and have fun and go to the casinos and do all the things. And then all of a sudden, there's a great documentary, and I can't remember what it is. Google it with this vague description. But it was the guy who was there during the election of Castro and when it was switching, and he was doing a documentary on Cuba just as hey, here's a documentary on Cuba. And then he came back every 10 years until the 2000s, and he was meeting some of the same people through that time and interviewing them through that time. It's a great documentary. I wish I can remember the name. I think it's on Netflix. But the point of that is you can watch the progression of what happens to these individuals and to these families under that.
Or the regression,
mindset.
really.
The regression, yeah, that's the right word, regression. And I think if you really had an example of like that in New York, hopefully if that was to happen, it will happen in a much shorter time frame, and the pain will become evident quickly so everyone can see it and recognize it, and then hopefully shift gears. Were you in New York during kind of Giuliani time?
Yeah.
Tell me about, because I was not paying attention to that. I was in Chicago at the time. Tell me about how the Giuliani and how did that mindset kind of come about culturally within the city that even happened?
Well, Giuliani made his name for putting away John Gotti and cleaning up the mafia, right? And then when Giuliani came into office, New York was a very dangerous place. He was actually, in a lot of ways, he was the law and order mayor, right? Just like Trump is the law and order president, and to a certain degree, DeSantis is the law and order governor.
Right.
You'd pull out of the Lincoln or the Holland, mostly the Holland Tunnel, to go, you're on Canal Street, right? And you get stopped at this light. and vagrants would come up, and basically they'd pee in a water bottle, and they'd put it on your windshield, and then they'd wipe your windshield and demand that you pay them something, right?
Yeah.
And then if you didn't, they would tear your windshield wiper off your car, right? And so it was just, or 42nd Street was the quintessential 42nd Street, right? Like,
Right.
that,
Like you see in the old 70s
The House of
movies.
Ill Repute,
Yeah.
right? Or, if you look at where like all of the main stores are now in Times Square, they were all, XXX theaters
Right.
and sex shops, right? And so, Giuliani really cleaned all that up,
Right.
creating a police presence, really getting on top of the city.
Right. So you're saying that the people of New York at that time saw the problem with enough clarity to vote for that type of policy.
Well, you bring up an interesting point because Koch was an ultra-liberal Democrat mayor, followed by Dinkins, which is really, in a lot of ways, a parallel to Mondani. Dinkins was promising all of these free things, and what did Dinkins wind up doing? Right? He wound up taking trips to Africa to go on trade missions, right? To your point of the haves and the have-nots, right? Mondani's going to wind up traveling the world, championing how amazing New York is, while New Yorkers suffer, right, under this transition to free goods.
I think the maybe the hope is that it is cyclical, right? That it doesn't ever get so far one direction that it can't swing back the other way. So maybe given that little theory that we just laid out there, maybe Mondani will be the bottom of it, and then everyone's going to be like, oh shoot, that's a bad idea, and you'll get enough people to say, okay, that doesn't work, whatever, and then you get your next Giuliani or your next whoever. Like, I don't know.
I think I think the fly in the ointment there is voter registration, voter ID, and how elections are carried out in New York, right? In Dinkins' age, you didn't have so many illegal immigrants in the city, with identification that they could potentially go and vote, right? So, really got to ask yourself, like, as a citizen who pays taxes, right? I demand something from my government in return for me paying those taxes. People should not be coming to this country and getting more benefits than me, who contribute to the system. Right? People should not be coming to this country and get put up in hotels. They should not be getting $500 a month in EBT cards, right? Like, what are you, to our point earlier about coming to this country, how are you aligning with this country? You should be coming to this country because you want to build a better future for yourself. And by building that better future for yourself, you're contributing to the country and the good of all its people. Yeah,
it's funny. It's interesting. A lot of the pushback with the immigration stuff is that that the left will say is that, well, you don't like immigrants, right? Oh, you don't like immigrants. Oh, they're all, they're kind of saying immigrants are all the same, which is totally not true, right? Because even just the example you just gave, you said if you're paying, if you, Will, are paying taxes, you want something in return, right? Of course. So the question is that the immigrant who came here and did everything right and checked all the boxes, paid all the money, did all the things, waved the American flag and said, I'm an American now, they did everything right. So they're entitled to be an American, and they're entitled to that they put all that hard work in to make sure that there aren't 10 other guys that skipped over that process and then they end up with getting more. Because that guy didn't get his EBT card and his all these benefits. He didn't get that stuff. He did everything right, and he contributed, and he did what he needed to do.
It's a great example for all of the minority groups. Black, Asian, Indian, whatever, in New York. Voting for Mondani will make sure that the people who have not worked hard, who have not contributed to the system, who have not paid taxes, are treated more fairly than those who work every day and make sure that New York City runs and that their families are provided for. And to your point earlier, take personal responsibility. And I think that's really what that vote comes down to, is do you feel that other people should be given things for not earning them?
Yeah.
And if you're okay with a candidate that is going to do that, okay, well, how would you feel? Dan, I hire you, right? And I tell you, Dan, you got to mop the floors, then you got to take out the garbage, then you got to do all these things, and I'm going to pay you $15 an hour, right? And then I'm going to hire Joe, and Joe, all you have to do is sit on the couch all day, and I'm going to pay you $15 an hour.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, 5 of which that 15 comes from Dan. Dan, you're only getting 10 now.
Exactly, right? So Dan, you got to subsidize Joe, and Joe's not going to do anything.
Right.
So that's really what it comes down to.
Right. And talk about a lowering of your quality of life. Let's think about the free buses as an example. Like, not even all the like how do you pay for stuff, like all that stuff, take that aside. Just the experience of riding a free bus everywhere. It gets cold in New York, just like it got cold in Chicago, right? I know what it is to be when it's cold out, even though I've lived down here for a while. The people that ride the bus now have to pay their $2 or whatever it is, and then they have to get off the bus, right? Once the bus is free, there's nothing that doesn't stop somebody from just like
living on the bus,
right? Like there's no reason to ever get off the bus or you just hop on. So I don't think the quality of the experience is going to be great for people who have to ride the bus.
Yeah.
I'd rather pay the $2 and make sure that we don't have people living on the bus, because that's what's going to happen. I guarantee it. That's what's going to happen.
Well, thanks a lot, Dan. It was great having this time with you. I look forward to your show, and I'm sure everybody on the Roar Network is looking forward to the big DA show as well. And, we got a couple of weeks left before the election in New York. I really hope people wake up and realize that this is not an experiment worth undertaking at this moment in history. And we want better things for all of you. Thank you so much. See you next time on The Source, Rulebreakers, Lawmakers, and Influencers.